and welcome into the Roundtable. I'm Bill Priestley here alone, joined by Thomas Wasson, and today we're going to be talking about driver recruiting, especially in an age of baby boomer retirement. And joining us remotely is Marilyn Serber, who is with 10th Street as a transportation leader, and she's been traveling around the country and now internationally as well, as she finds herself above our northern border up in Ontario, Canada. Marilyn, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is one of my favorite topics.
Oh, good. That's why I asked. Let's dive into this. I don't think, and I could be wrong, I don't think there's been an industry that has been kind of in more of a difficult strait here, especially when we're talking about recent driver shortages. Obviously, that's coming back with some good deal of recruiting, but in trying to recruit employees, especially as baby boomers are now retiring, you've got other things going on, competition with other industries that are dealing with the same kinds of issues. You've got an industry which requires drivers to be 21, at least in most states at this particular point, and you're going to have a population crunch here over the course of the next 5-10 years or so as the baby boomers again continue to leave the market. How do you assess right now the situation for trucking companies in terms of being able to keep the personnel power to keep the trucks on the road and moving?
So it's really interesting because we're starting to see, just really the generational shift in our workforce where, millennials are now becoming the largest population of workers. But millennials are not kids. I'm a millennial. I'm the oldest of millennials, right? And I'm turning 40 in September. So I think we first have to kind of understand what the different generations are in the workplace, right? And who are baby boomers and Generation X and millennials, and then now we even have iGens that we are eligible to become truck drivers, and really kind of understand what the different generations are. And we need to understand what our workforce is made up of, and every company is different. And so I think each carrier needs to take stock of that. But we know industry wide, right, that the driver pool has drastically changed, meaning that, we are seeing numbers as high as, 48% of drivers that are applying for jobs across our platform are 40 and under. So that's a big shift. And so I think what companies have to do to stay viable is we have to say, okay, who are our workforce, and how do we identify who we want in our workforce, and how do we attract them in a different way? I think we first just have to really understand as an industry that what the needs of a baby boomer are, and the needs of a lot of millennials, but in iGens, they're just very different. And so we have to look at things. I don't think we can afford to look at things as a one size fits all format, right? We advertise this way, we onboard you this way, we train you this way, you get we have to say, hey, we've got this huge diverse workforce, and we're only talking about age right now. We're not even talking about all of the diversity in backgrounds and nationalities and all of those other things that is also only going to continue to become more diverse as the workforce trends younger. I think we have to figure out, how do we offer different programs? How do we assess the needs of our drivers that are coming in and our existing fleet? And then how do we create programs to meet the needs of a more diverse than ever workforce?
Mm-hmm. Thomas, let me turn to you for a second. Who do you think this is going to affect the most when it comes to retiring baby boomers and seeing this workforce personnel drop, level out over the course of the next 10 years, but still declining right now? Is this going to hit the enterprise trucking, or is this going to hit the owner-operator the most?
I feel like it's going to hit enterprise trucking first. When I worked at enterprise carriers, you partner up with CDL schools. It's like the Statue of Liberty. You're bringing in new entrants. They're matriculating in. Smaller carriers, you're going to get more attention. You're going to have more stuff compared to a larger carrier. Folks try to go into smaller carriers, but I thought, you brought up a great point earlier. It's going to change the nature of it. Trucking, we sell you this idea of trucking from a job role, but what we don't understand understand is now with the baby boomers retiring, the lifestyle and fundamental identity of trucking will change. I don't know if a lot of millennials don't even remember watching Smokey and the Bandit or Convoy or this trucking, right. This mythology of trucking and how we view this job is going to have a lot of pressure placed on it just because, as a millennial myself, I'm more concerned about crippling student loan debt than having a particular, drive. And that's going to be a challenge. I think enterprise carriers are going to be the first ones that are going to have to innovate to bring more people in the door. And then as we see the competition heat up, smaller carriers are going to have to make adjustments.
Marilyn, what you mentioned, obviously we're talking about culture changes in between the generations, but right now for trucking companies, maybe what's the biggest culture change that needs to happen in order to attract the younger driver, not necessarily the younger driver, but just drivers in general of a different age group into trucking?
So I think the biggest thing that you can do is look at your program, starting first, right, with your advertising. What is it that you're featuring? I mean, just like what you were saying, Thomas, the values are different. So, if you're showing a picture of only your truck in your ads, that's maybe not broad sweeping appeal to every generation that you're trying to attract. And, I think Thomas hit it on the head. Trucking is sexy. We need to talk about the technology and talk about also the huge impact on our country, and our just the overall economy that trucking makes, right? Like, different generations definitely care about that. They care about what's bigger than them. They care about the culture of your company. And so what is that culture? And, how are you presenting it in the marketplace? Are you presenting it? It's definitely not Smokey and the Bandit. And you're absolutely right. People under, I don't remember watching Smokey and the Bandit either. And so I think we just have to know those things, right? And I think having hard numbers for us to be able to say, hey, this is who is in the market is an awakening for companies. I think before we've been talking about this and saying, well, it's coming, but it's like now it's here. And so I think companies are ready to say, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, look at your advertising, look at how you're onboarding drivers. Is everything mobile friendly? Does everything happen digitally? Are you doing things, whereas a key generational thing is I think a lot of times baby boomers, they wouldn't necessarily want to be doing work ahead of time for their next job, right? It was like, well, when I get to that job, I'm going to fill out all the paperwork. I would say that's opposite with younger generations. They want to have as much done up front as they can. How are you engaging them kind of right from the beginning? And how are you using modern communication methods, right, to complete your hiring process?
I'm going to ask both of you what I think is an incredibly difficult question, so I hope that you both can have some insight into this as well. Earlier this week, I talked with Dr. Mark Scott at the University of Arkansas talking about this very subject, but also looking at this from a futuristic standpoint in terms of, obviously, we're going to be losing personnel in terms of drivers in the truck driving field, but eventually, we're also going to see autonomous trucks come online. Now, this may not be 10, 20, could be 40 years in the future, but that's certainly apparent in terms of human nature that, well, we're going to try and maneuver a way to have machines essentially take over those jobs that humans don't necessarily want to do. With that in mind, Thomas, let me start with you. When you look at that situation with autonomy and how it's coming on board and how it's being marketed and how it's being forecasted, how much does that make the prospective driver want to join the fleet when you know that eventually at some point, who knows when, that job may very well be replaced? Again, we may be talking a generation in the future, but it's still marketing against that particular position.
I think that's a great question, Bill. And, trucking has to adapt their messaging. 200 years ago, 80% of all jobs were agricultural. The agricultural revolution now means that less than 1% with our new methods and automation and farming. It means that we don't need as many people. So now we have, everyone was saying, oh, during the Industrial Revolution, the farmers would lose their job. The world's coming to an end. We're going to see this similarly with automation. It's It's up to trucking to actually change and evolve. And for the biggest problem right now in trucking is, who do you court because of competition? The shipper. Who do you have to find some unwilling participant and convince them with a new truck or something else? You have to change the messaging. Millennials and younger generations, they're used to Marvel style movies. They're used to having this kind of, a vision painted out for them. And I think the problem is right now, us as an industry are still stuck in 1985 when we're just trying to sell them fancier truck stop coffee. So, first thing you gotta do, it's gonna be okay. Secondly, there's still a role for you. And, thirdly, you have to kind of show them this future. Millennials and younger generations are why people. They want to know why. We got to tell them why.
Marilyn?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those things. I definitely think that we are a long way, if ever, right, from not having a driver in the seat for a lot of things. But I also think that as an industry, we're kind of obsessed with this topic. And I don't think it's as important, for the general population. And even people who are entering our industry, I spend a lot of time in the school space, right? And working, with trucking schools and carriers that are hiring students. And I don't know, out of the hundreds of students I've seen over the past couple of years, if I've been asked if their job is going to be replaced by an autonomous vehicle more than a handful of times. So I think that most people in the general population probably think that that's further off, it seems, than what we think, because I think the more informed you are on the topic, probably the sooner you think autonomy is coming to the market. But again, most of those conversations that I'm still having are all about driver assisted. And so I do think it's our, duty as an industry to make sure that we continue that message, along with all of our other image campaigns of, hey, we need drivers, we want drivers, but I guess, and so I think we just have to continue to do that.
Well, obviously, it's great that we're talking about recruiting, but also retention is another issue. And you're also dealing with a generation that may not necessarily like the idea of sticking with one career for a long period of time. I know that when we talked a while ago with a few people, especially in the recruitment space, they would say, well, you want to spend some money on recruitment, but you want to spend a lot more on retention at this point. Marilyn, as you look at that situation, how much of that is a concern when you're maybe trying to attract a younger driver at the same time knowing that after 3, 4, 5, 6 years, they may just decide, I just want to do something else?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that autonomy probably helps us in that situation, right? Because it helps us maybe create a career path, or as, jobs are starting to change and the driver job is evolving, right? And becoming something a little bit different as technology will continue to evolve. I think we can build in those career paths more than ever, which is highly important to people starting out their career in younger generations. And so I think we need to be having those conversations, but I think absolutely we have to focus on retention. It's hard because it's really hard to measure the ROI of your retention programs. It's really, really hard to tie direct, correlation to those things. But I think when it comes to retaining all drivers, but specifically, I think younger drivers, and as our industry is evolving, it's about choices and how can we make the right choice for the driver that we're dealing with in that moment, again, versus, a broad, wide sweeping, this is our policy and this is how it has to be. And so I think as we have to manage drivers on a more individual basis more than ever, and that will improve retention.
Thomas, how would you improve retention, obviously, with the situation where you have a driver that comes in and they say, or a younger driver, they say, I'm done after a certain number of years?
I mean, you just have to be honest with them and make sure that your goals align with them. I want to see you succeed. I want to see you make as much income. And my job as the business is to make attractive things for you to do that. And so helping repay student loans, finding out other ways outside of the business itself could be great potential out-of-the-box solutions in order to have an asymmetric retention advantage.
Well, that's going to have to do it for us for this particular subject. Marilyn, thanks so much for joining us. This is going to be an exciting subject to watch over the course, not only the next 6 months, but maybe even the next 6 to 10 years as well. So thanks so much for joining us from Ontario.